Okay, if no one's gonna ask, I'll ask. Should we be worried? It might sound like a crazy question after the extraordinary military operation that saw the US armed forces smash and grab a foreign head of state, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, and his wife for some reason. And afterwards, Trump has flat out said,
"So we are going to run the country."
But should Thailand or any other Southeast Asian nation even entertain the idea that what happened in Venezuela could happen here? Could an Asian country get Maduro'd? It's comforting to think that we're on the other side of the world. Different government, different resources, different geopolitical interests, but everything is perspective. The region is not without its authoritarian streak. And to sweeten the pot, there are deposits of rare earth elements. Were last year's trade deals with the US enough for the region to skate by? We've even shown here on The Signal that Southeast Asia, despite our best efforts, is undeniably ground zero for scam syndicates, which spill over into all kinds of transnational crime. Will our governments be deemed incapable of handling the situation? On this week's episode of The Signal, we're taking a wider view in the wake of the US removing the leader of Venezuela to see what it could mean for Thailand and Southeast Asia. And joining me today to help cut through the noise and make sense of this issue is William J. Jones, Assistant Professor at the Social Science Division of Mahidol University International College. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so lucky to have an expert opinion on this issue. So the first thing that we want to get into is, what is the crazy cocktail of different factors that we're hearing from the Trump administration that have led to this military action?
The first layer, I suppose, would be the old historical paradigm, if you will, of American dominance, or some would say sort of a sphere of influence over the Western Hemisphere, which dates back to President Monroe, but was updated a number of times. And it basically sort of puts out kind of the understanding that particularly military alliances, foreign military bases, and the like would not be tolerated in the Western Hemisphere as being a distinct security threat to the American state. I think in that regard, there are a number of relationships that the Venezuelans had built up over a number of years, specifically with the Russians. We can see this with what the Americans, I presume, consider provocative moves, specifically the sort of coup attempt or assassination attempt in 2019, when Russia sent bombers, long-range bombers, military advisors, and then also they've been building up Venezuela's military capabilities, with air defense systems and such, training activities over this period of time, from basically sort of the first Trump administration to present. So there's kind of a military aspect to that.
So it was in a recent CNN interview, just to refresh our collective memory here, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said that, quote, "We're going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. It's absurd that we would allow a nation in our own backyard to become a supplier of resources to our adversaries and not us, to hoard weapons, to be able to be positioned as an asset against the US. So there is a strategic military objective as well."
Definitely. I think that tunes in quite strongly, perhaps, with maybe the second and most important layer, which would be the economic connections, resource-wise, and then also the larger infrastructure sort of development that the Chinese have going on in Central and Latin America. Right. I mean, we've heard the arguments put forth about China, buying perhaps, 3 to 5% of its oil from Venezuela, and then sort of keeping that economic lifeline open to the Venezuelan government for a number of years now, when it was cut off from the Americans. But I think this also maybe tunes into the larger role that China's been playing over the last decade in Latin America. I mean, we can see this specifically with the building of an enormous port in Peru, and then plans for basically sort of a transcontinental railroad from Peru itself over into Brazil, and sort of further afield. along with plans for a new canal going across sort of Nicaragua and stuff. So I think this too is heavily into that, of sort of
Hmm.
pulling more and more countries in America's traditional sphere into China's economic orbit.
So something came up very recently after the abduction, which is the issue of Greenland, which goes all the way back to the first Trump administration, where he wants the U.S. to control Greenland for military strategic purposes. Now that we've seen such a brazen action taken in Venezuela, to what degree should Greenland be worried?
Extremely. Um, I mean, and the Europeans writ large, because this is going to put a massive, if it happens, this is going to create a massive schism within NATO, right? And the Europeans will be forced to choose, right? I mean,
Hmm.
protecting one of our own and having some principles,
Hmm.
or sort of folding to Trump again. It's difficult to say just how serious Trump is, right? Because he's not serious until he is serious. And I think maybe the nature, if you will, of Trump and this administration is they will push and push and push where they can, and they'll push until they get pushed back.
Hmm.
So it's really a test of strength, no matter who the Americans are dealing with. So unfortunately, I think if Trump thinks he
Hmm.
can do the cost benefit analysis, and the Europeans will fall in line, and American can get more access to the Arctic. Um, yeah, he might do it.
The Monroe Doctrine was all about, protecting America's interests in its own backyard. But we've seen Trump, or the Trump Doctrine, be that, what isn't our backyard, more or less. I'm interested to get your take on Southeast Asia and how that factors into Trump's interests, because rare earth elements have been a real, I'll say, weak point for Trump in his dealings with China in the trade war with China, where China has a lot of leverage in terms of rare earth elements and refining them, more importantly. We've also discovered, to some degree, these elements present in not insignificant amounts in Southeast Asia. Do you think that what might be the justification or the strategic factors behind a similar intervention, if there were one, in ASEAN and Southeast Asia?
If there is a point where conflict could happen, it would be with the South China Sea, undoubtedly. But that's kind of Southeast to Northeast Asia, right? I mean, this is a core American interest.
Hmm.
And here you really have to look
Hmm.
at the Philippines, the weaponry that America has been stationing in the Philippines, Typhoon missiles, the buildup going on right now in Taiwan consistently. This could be the big point of possible friction. Southeast Asia writ large, I just don't see it um, mattering necessarily that much to take up, Trump's bandwidth. With regard to rare earths and stuff, I think there's 2 points to make here, which are they kind of coincide with one another. One is, while rare earths are the new big thing, sort of going forward, and Trump has made a lot of noise about this, America just doesn't have the capabilities to refine these in any significant quantities.
Right.
I'm not a professional sort of expert on sort of rare earths, but my understanding from those who are is that to build up these capacities to any significant degree would take
Right.
a decade, perhaps, of sustained investment, industrial policy, etc. R&D, serious work, which the Chinese have built up over the last 40 years. Right, this is the fruit of their labor that we're seeing now. But of a point, one particular country of interest recently is Indonesia. Um,
Right.
yeah, the way the Indonesians approached their trade negotiations on tariffs with Trump was to actually leverage their, I think it's like 50% of world capacity on refining nickel, which has been built up with the Chinese over the last almost kind of 7 years, a decade. And
Right.
this is where the Trump administration conceded ground, to the Indonesians because they basically have no choice. right? And they're so far away. So there are capabilities for some ASEAN states if they have, or if they can leverage their usefulness, right? Vietnam, Indonesia, against both the Chinese and the Americans, right? Sort of playing kind of both off, or bargaining up, yeah, this kind of thing.
So, in regards to ASEAN affairs, we know that the ASEAN way politically has been to practice non-alignment, non-interference, and back in August at the inaugural Thailand Security Dialogue, Siasak Phuongkhet Kao, who is currently the foreign minister, he said the old world order conceived at the end of World War II is giving way to a new world order. And he made the critique at the time, not in his capacity as foreign minister, but he made the critique at the time that the ASEAN way may need to adapt, especially in the wake now of the Trump administration, though he didn't say that explicitly. My question here is, do you see that adaptation in ASEAN in the next few years? Do you see is there any connection between what happened in Venezuela accelerating that shift?
This is no. From being an observer and someone who studied sort of ASEAN, I don't know, from afar and up close for over a decade, every time historically that we've seen ASEAN integration move forward quite rapidly, be it the formation of ASEAN, the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement 1992, the ASEAN communities, it's always because of an external force rather than something sort of internal within ASEAN, right? Communism, the end of the Cold War. I'll leave it sort of with a question mark to say, if Trump's belligerence or whatnot is so far away from ASEAN states, I wouldn't count on it. But if it moves closer to ASEAN states and we see threats of a direct intervention, in some far off place such as, the Philippines or Myanmar, God forbid, Thailand or something like this, this may be enough to stimulate some rethinking.
So in your read of the situation, there would have to be some major strategic reason that doesn't quite present itself yet.
I think Trump's tariffs were at least an opening kind of shot or call to ASEAN states that it's been a long time since a great power has, in Thai, like Pukto, come in and bang the table, and demanded something so, I would say so unorthodox in terms of diplomatic culture. If something, along security and defense lines happened where, ASEAN states were forced to make a choice, who knows where it could break? I mean, it could be a fundamental schism within ASEAN, where you have certain states breaking towards America and certain states breaking towards sort of, the Chinese kind of sphere. I mean, even stalwart allies, like Thailand, I mean, we've noticed this shift since you're based here in Thailand, over the course of the last 10 years, just how far Thailand has drifted towards a Chinese understanding of the world. This is more or less prevalent, throughout most of Southeast Asia, except for perhaps, with the exception maybe the Philippines, which still counts America as maybe its number one trade partner, it feels that threat from China and the South China Sea very acutely, the other, it's a very difficult choice, right? I mean, development, economic well-being, or, national security, right? Extremely difficult choice.
All right, well, Jay, that's everything from me here. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't thank you enough for sharing and lending your expertise to the program.
Absolutely, Chanafat. It's an honor and a pleasure, anytime.
Thank you so much. So there you have it. And you know what? Even if there were no cause for concern for Thailand or our Southeast Asian neighbors, after what happened, there's no denying that, geopolitically speaking, we've gone through the looking glass, and there's no going back. I'm Benjamin Ruchopakan, and this has been Cutting Through the Noise with The Signal.